Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. We're very excited to get to talk to you today about Javon Davis's case. Some of you will have read about him in the newspaper in March when his case was first dismissed by the judge and then later dismissed by the prosecutor in the interest of justice. Normally, we would have been able to have a press conference to introduce you to him, but we can't because of the COVID situation, so we decided to do this instead. With me today is Javon himself. So if you'd say hi.
Hi, how you doing?
So Javon spent 5 years in prison out of a 28-year sentence before being released in early March. At that time when he was first released, he was put on home confinement pending the prosecutor's decision as to whether to retry him. But then later on in March, as I said, they dismissed the case and he was able to go home. And most of today's program will be focused on getting to ask him questions. We also solicited questions from all of you out there. So I've got some questions that I'll ask that the public wanted to know about too. Also with us today, so I'm Julie Jonas. I should have said that to start with. I'm the legal director at the Innocence Project of Minnesota. I've been there since 2003. In addition to my work there, I teach at the University of Minnesota Law School and at Mitchell-Hamlin. And I also direct the Innocence Clinic at both of those schools where students actually work on cases like Javon's. With me today is also Jim Mayer. He's our staff attorney at the Innocence Project. You say hi, Jim.
Hello, everybody.
And Jim is also a University of Minnesota law grad. Before coming to IPMN, he spent more than a decade as a private practice litigator. During that time, he got involved doing innocence work as a pro bono attorney, including death penalty cases in Louisiana. The highlight of his career was having a conviction and death sentence reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Also with us today is Jon Hopeman. Jon, do you want to say hi?
Hello, it's my honor to be here.
Thank you. John's also a U of M grad, 1976. After that, he worked as a clinical instructor for the University of Minnesota for 7 years, and then left to go work as an assistant U.S. attorney for another 11 years, and since that time has been in private practice doing largely white-collar criminal defense work as well as terrorism and murder cases. He's also for almost 30 years been an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota, and he's been on the Innocence Project board for the last 12 years. It was my great honor to be able to work on Javon's case with Jim and Jon and ultimately secure his release. I couldn't have asked for a better group of guys to work with. Before we get to your questions, though, I do want to tell a little bit about Javon's case for people who aren't that familiar with it. Javon went to prison for a 2014 shooting that occurred outside of Target Field. No one died, but there were two victims who were shot. One was critically injured and was paralyzed. The other had a lesser injury. Both men had been working on maintenance at Target Field that night and got off work at almost 3 a.m. in the morning. And as they were leaving, they were both shot at. The reason Javon became implicated was because one woman who was present at the scene thought that one of the shooters, and there were 3 people involved, 3 possible shooters, but one of the witnesses thought that one of the shooters looked like a good friend of Javon's. Aside from her identification, no one on the scene was able to make any sort of identification because the perpetrators had been wearing hoods and it happened very quickly. The victims were very clear that they had no idea who shot at them. There were some other bystander witnesses who also could not make identifications. But based on what this woman said, that she thought she knew who the shooter was, and the police believed that Javon was a good friend of this potential shooter, the police continued questioning the victims. And in fact, even though one of the victims had said twice he was certain he didn't know who shot him, the police brought him in and interrogated him for well over an hour and lied to him and said that they had Javon on videotape as the shooter. And after about an hour of badgering and coercing him, he agreed, when looking at a photo array, to one of those pictures being Javon. Of course, he already knew who Javon was, okay? So that was the identification, faulty as it may be, that really brought this case together for law enforcement. We did get a question from a supporter asking why we took the case. You know, what are the things that we're looking for in a case? And I would say the primary reason we took Javon's cases is that he had one of the best alibis I'd ever seen. It was proven through cell tower records and cell phone records and the person he was on the phone with that he was on the phone at the exact time of the shooting and that he was at least 7 miles away from the crime scene. That was an alibi, the likes of which I'd very, very rarely seen. It was just rock solid. In addition, in reviewing the trial transcript, the one victim who had made this faulty identification for the police took the witness stand, looked at Javon and said he is not the shooter and he did not want to send an innocent man to prison. Even with that weak trial evidence and the powerful alibi, he was convicted and again sent to prison for 28 years. He wrote to us. That's how most people apply for our services. As we started to review the case, we saw how weak the evidence was. We saw the powerful alibi. And so a couple of students from the University of Minnesota went out to question him about his case and learn more about the case. And he said something that really stuck with us. He said to them, "I'm Innocence, Project Innocent." And what he was saying is, we have a lot of people who apply to us, obviously, who aren't innocent. We have people who apply to us who complain about the fairness of their trial, that they had an excessive sentence, that they only played a minor role in the crime. And although those all may be valid complaints, we are actually looking for people who are actually innocent, Innocence Project Innocent, and Javon knew that, and it became very compelling for us. With that, I'm going to shift it over to Jon Hopeman to talk about what the legal claims were that allowed us to bring his case back into court.
The thrust of Javon's legal claim was that he received ineffective assistance of trial counsel. Trial counsel, we were able to show, failed to object to highly improper, inflammatory, and prejudicial evidence. I wouldn't have even called it evidence. It was more like innuendo wrapped in slander. The lawyer failed to call witnesses who would have contradicted the prosecution's witnesses. And the lawyer failed to hire a cell phone expert who would have, and a cell tower expert who would have cemented the alibi. There were witnesses who testified to the alibi, but there was another prosecution witness who testified against the alibi. And so these cell phone records and the science behind the cell phone and the tower would have buttressed the alibi and in fact cemented it. He was in fact at the Flame Burger restaurant, I think in Fridley, 7 miles away. That was the thrust of Javon's argument to the court. And we had 3 or 4 days of hearing before Judge Karasoff, and we called the defense lawyer to the stand, and to his credit, he admitted that he had fallen far short of what a competent lawyer's performance would have been. We called Earl Gray as an expert witness on effective assistance of counsel, and another expert who was a veteran criminal defense lawyer, and they were both very powerful and effective witnesses, and that was the essence of the defense. We got lucky because the assistant county attorney on the case, Sean Cahill, was actually interested in finding the truth. He struck hard blows, but he struck fair blows. And we have to thank him and Mr. Freeman, the county attorney, for their handling of the case.
Okay, well, so when the hearing was done, we all felt very good about what had happened. We sort of had the perfect storm of the right case with the right facts, an innocent client, and the right judge. I mean, Judge Karasoff was the one who presided over the original trial. He's the one who repeatedly expressed concern on the record about what defense counsel was doing, or more often not doing, in his courtroom. And so we felt good about everything. We're waiting for the decision. A few weeks before that decision is set to come out, we find out that Judge Karasoff has suffered a heart attack and that he's in a coma. And so now we're realizing that this decision is not going to come from Judge Karasoff. So that was a tragic event that nobody saw coming. Put us in the position of having to tell Javon here, who by now has spent almost 6 years behind bars for someone else's crime and who's been waiting a year for this decision, that he's going to have to wait some more. And so it was another 5 months of waiting. And finally, the decision did come down from Judge Skagens, who had replaced Judge Karasoff. And this was an amazing order from the judge. It was 142 pages long. It was painstaking. It was extremely detailed. And we understood why it had taken the court so long to come up with this order. And what the court found was that indeed trial counsel's performance for Javon fell below a minimum standard of competence when he failed to object to certain evidence coming in, the innuendo wrapped in slander, as Jon described, for not objecting to that evidence, for failing to bring in all of this other evidence that was exculpatory and could have shown that Javon was not present and didn't commit this crime. He also found that Javon's appellate counsel was ineffective for failing to raise the issue of his trial lawyer's ineffectiveness. So the court noted that the state had failed to put on any expert testimony, to put on any expert who would stand up and vouch for the work, the performance that was put on by Javon's lawyers, and that was important to the court as well. And most importantly, what the court found was that these errors were prejudicial. That means they made a difference. And what the court said was that had Javon had competent representation, the state's case would have been severely undercut. And it's hard to imagine that case leading to a guilty verdict, which is exactly what we had thought from the beginning. So at that point, Javon's conviction was tossed out, and now it goes to the state, to the prosecution, to decide what's going to happen next. Now, given the state of the evidence at that point, we all felt pretty good that the state would not want to retry him. But that's not what they said. When the decision came out, the state said that they did intend to retry Javon. Very disappointing, but we had to deal with it. And so now we found ourselves in the middle of trial preparation. Meanwhile, a bail hearing was held because we're back at square one, as if Javon had just been arrested. So we get in front of the judge for a bail hearing. Before the first trial, bail had been set at about $500,000, I believe. And the state took the position that that was where bail should stay. Julie argued that we were in a very different situation now, that the case against Javon was weak, that Javon had behaved himself perfectly while he was in jail, and that he should be released without bail. The judge agreed with us and ordered that Javon be immediately released to home confinement, which was a huge victory, and it sent a signal to the state about what the judge thought of the case. Over the weeks that followed, we started hammering the state with pretrial motions, pointing out that the state really didn't have any admissible evidence to present against Javon, and that there was really no reason to have a trial at this point because they didn't have any evidence they could put in to show that he committed this crime. The night before the day before the state's response was to come in to all of these motions, we found out from the state that they did not intend to oppose. They did not intend to retry Javon. They had decided to dismiss the charges against him. And that day, a one-page order came out dismissing all charges against Javon in the interests of justice. So finally, we all agreed on something, that dismissal of the charges against Javon was in the interest of justice. So that day, Javon's ankle bracelet was removed. He was free to stay home, just like the rest of us have been staying home, only now without the ankle bracelet and feeling a lot better about his life, I think. So that's what happened. I'm sure everyone would like to hear from Javon at this point, the man himself. So Javon, if I can, let me just start by asking you what it's like to be home. I'm sure that's what everybody wants to know.
Well, it's overwhelming. It just feels great, and it's kind of overwhelming at first. And as I got used to it with the kids and my family and just getting back to normal, everything's great. I'm glad to be back home. My kids are happy I'm home. My family happy I'm home. My friends, me, you guys. So every time I've been home, it's been okay. It's been, well, great, not okay, because it's been a long time. So yeah, I've just been happy. It's exciting, overwhelming. So many different emotions come when everything's happened. Everything I've been through in the last 40 days has been just like over the top. It makes me like, it's just, I'll be ecstatic one moment, then I'll be like pinching myself like, is it real one moment? And so I got all these different emotions all the time.
Let me take you back to a less happy time. At some point, originally, you were arrested for this crime. What were you thinking at the time of your arrest? How did that go?
At the time of my arrest, I knew that I didn't have anything to do with the crime. So at the time of my arrest, I just felt like the police was bothering me or something. I never knew what was going on. I never knew that initially Kibbe had said that it was me or whatever. I never knew anything. So I was like kind of confused and just wondering like, why would you guys be looking for me for some shooting that I have nothing to do with, that I don't even know about? And then I really didn't know until I was in their custody, and I'm like, all right, so what am I here for? And so when they told me, I was just really confused, like, huh? I was confused. Like, I couldn't walk at the time. So I was just very, very confused of why they would be looking for me and let alone arrest me for something that I didn't know anything about. So I was really, really, really confused. Like the rest of the world, like I was more like them, just wondering like what happened. I didn't know anything at all. So I was very confused.
If I take you forward to the trial, at some point things keep going. You're sitting there at the table with the trial going on. At some point during the trial, did you have the feeling that maybe something was going wrong?
Yeah, at the time of the trial where I knew something was wrong, and that something was wrong, especially on my end, was Mike Patton, my lawyer, who's my trial counsel. He Kibby was the first witness, and they were talking to Kibby, and he told him on the stand that he didn't want to send an innocent man to prison and all this. And so Thad Tudor asked him about the video, and they played the video. And right before the video comes on, I asked Mike, my lawyer, like, what's on the video? And he tells me, like, it's only like 5 minutes long. It's him signing something. So Mike initially told me the video was 5 minutes long. And so every minute after 5 minutes was horrible. And it just kept going and going and going and going and going and going and going. And then I thought in my head, like, why would he tell me it was only 5 minutes? And I wasn't aware of the law like I am now that I've come home from prison, and I've studied and tried to learn more about it. So at the time, I really didn't know anything was happening, but I did wonder to myself, like, why did he tell me it was only 5 minutes? Like, why did he tell me this video was only 5 minutes?
Yeah, and as it turned out, the 5-minute video was almost an hour long, and he hadn't watched it before, right?
Yes.
And moving ahead to the end of the trial, this is something the rest of us, I'm sure, can't even imagine. What was it like how did you feel when you heard the jury verdict finding you guilty?
I was so heartbroken and sad, and I was frustrated, and I was still confused. At first, I was like, I don't even know how I got arrested for it. I don't know why they were looking for me for it. And then to go to trial and to lose and to be found guilty for something you know for a fact you had nothing at all to do with, it was kind of frustrating, and it was like one of the lowest points of my life. Well, the lowest point of my life. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me, but nothing like that. And so I was just like heartbroken. I was like, it took a lot for me to get back up and try to keep fighting for my life, because at that point I was like, 28 years, that's a long time. All you think about is the end. You don't think about, okay, there's still a chance. All you think about is the end. So you think about 2033, and I think about my kids. I was broken. Like it almost broke me. Like, I don't like to never say I'm broken, but I was really close to being broken. I was hanging on by the threads if I wasn't all the way broken. And I was just like, how? And I was just wondering, like, how? Like how? I was so frustrated. That's all I could keep saying is how and why. And that just was my main question for almost 5 years still. To the day I left prison, sometimes I was asking myself, like, how is this happening to me? And why is this happening to me? So I was broken. I was really broken at the end of the trial. Yeah.
Javon, I have a few questions for you. How old a man were you when you were arrested?
When I was arrested, I was 26 years old.
And so you're 31 or 32 now, is that right?
I'm 32.
When you were locked up, what is the thing that you miss the most?
Well, I have 6 kids, so I miss them the most. More than anything, I miss them. And I was missing out on their first days of kindergarten. A lot of my kids were younger, so I was missing out on their first day of kindergarten, their birthdays, Christmas, holidays, homework, everything. So the most thing I missed more than anything was my kids, and just being like, not being able to see some of the stuff they were going through, or being able to help them when they were going through stuff. So more than anything was my kids.
Were you able to see them at all when you were at Stillwater Prison?
Yeah. I was able to see majority of them. I think 2 of them I didn't get to see because of their mothers didn't live in this state, so it was really hard for us. So I'll see them like through pictures or talk to them on the phone. But I got to see the rest of my children, yeah.
And you're now, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, through visits and videograms and pictures and everything and talking to them. So, but it was hard. Sometime I would go long periods of time without seeing one child or not seeing any of them. It was hard. It was 5 years and 10 months. So it was really hard. Sometimes it was better for their moms, better for me, better relationships and everything. So
there's a woman in your life who's been very, very supportive of you during this ordeal, right?
Yes.
And tell us how you maintained that relationship when you were locked up.
Well, the woman is Elena, and it was hard. It was frustrating, especially because some of the stuff we went through before I came to prison. So, and being in prison, it's always hard, especially in relationships. But at the end of the day, there was stuff that happened. We had our ups and our downs. But at the end of the day, when I needed stuff or when I needed somebody to calm me down or help me, or when I needed stuff or needed positive messages to keep going on, she was always there. Or if I needed a visit from my kids, she'll go pick up my other kids where she's not the mother of, and she'll bring them to see me. Or she just seems to always know when I need her to be there, and she's always there. And life is hard when you're dealing with somebody in prison. I know I can be a bug. I know I was a bug to Jim and you guys a lot too. Call him like, man, I'm frustrated. When is the judge coming back? And Jim would just be like, all right, we're kind of bugged out too. It's all right. So I already know that. So just imagine for her, I'm calling her nonstop, probably 2 times every hour. Like, yeah, man, I'm so frustrated. Yeah, tell Julie I'm frustrated. Tell John I'm frustrated. Or tell Jim to call me. Stuff like that. So, and she was there through it all. So, I mean, there were times where it wasn't always good for us. There was times where it was bad, but we made it through. And that's at the end of the day, she made it through, and she's, I love her for it. And she's everything. She's like, man, she did a lot for me. There was a lot of nights and a lot of days where she was there and she made sure that I stayed focused. And she always told me, like, you're coming home. Like, I know you're going to come home. And she'd be like, man, listen, no matter what happens, John and Julie and Jim them is not going to give up on you. Don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. And all type of stuff. She's just great.
So when you were in Stillwater, did you think you had a future? What did you think about the future? Could you even see it?
It was like when I went to prison. So before Stillwater, you go to the St. Cloud for intake. So when it kind of goes back to like when Jim just said something about the end of trial. It was like at the end of the trial, I just thought everything was gone. Like everything that I wanted to do in life, all I could think about is that long amount of time. And all I could think about is why is this happening to me? And I thought my future was gone. I was like 2033. Yeah, I might be 45 years young, but that's a long time. And it was a lot of stuff that I thought that I wouldn't see, like my kids' basketball games and proms and school dances and stuff. And I thought I was going to miss it all. There was a point where I'm like, I'm a failure to my kids. Like, I'm going to miss everything. And I really thought my future was sitting somewhere in a correctional facility until it was time for me to leave. And I thought that way for a long time because I didn't have any help. And I felt like I was hopeless for a long time. I was like, dang, what am I going to do? I always knew I was innocent and I didn't do this, but I didn't have a way of getting out or a way of helping until you guys, the Innocent Project, and Julie and you and y'all decided to help me. And so I didn't really start thinking about my future again until you guys started helping me. Then I was like, man, well, I got some help, so maybe it's possible. So then I thought I had a future again. Like before then, I was thinking like, oh man, I just failed my everything, lost everything.
How do you see your future now?
Oh man, stars the limit. Hi, stars the limit. But yeah, man, I see my future now and it's good. Like I got my life back. I got a second chance at life. I'm older, more mature. I know more things. I understand more of the things that that's required for me as a man. and I'm just older, I'm wiser, and it didn't help me getting taken away from my kids, but I made the best of it in my head, and I made the best of it with my plans to go forward and not to put myself in any situations like this again or any worse situations. I know how it feels to lose everything. I've lost everything. Like, it was a point in time where I lost everything, and I know how it feels to lose everything. And sometimes we need a wake-up call. I don't know if it's God giving me my wake-up call, but my future is, man, unlimited. There's anything. I feel like I can do anything, because this was the hardest thing I did in my life, and I accomplished that with the help of you guys. So I know that I can do anything, and that's the type of, I got a lot of stuff planned with my kids. My sons play basketball, my daughters, just a lot of stuff just planned in my future that I think that I need to handle and that I'm going to get done.
That is just kind of amazing. And I almost wish we could just end there, but we also have some really good questions that came in from our supporters. We asked people last week if they had any questions that they wanted to ask you, and we did get quite a few. So I'm going to ask you a couple of them, okay?
Okay, that's okay.
Some of them are pretty timely too. One person asked, can you imagine what it would be like now if you were still in prison with the pandemic situation?
Yes. If I was still in prison, and I know people that are still in prison, some of my friends are in prison, like some of the people I developed close relationships while I was there, I talked to them, and right now it's horrible because there's no such thing as social distancing, especially in Minnesota Stillwater Correctional Facility, where every room is right next door to each other. So no matter what, even if they put you on lockdown and say everybody stay in your room, it's open bars. So anything I breathe, cough, sneeze, touch, or anything, it gets spread right next to the door. It's so close and it's so cluttered that there's no social distancing, and there's really like no help really. Our hospitals out in the free world is going through need so much help. So I know in prison, the nurses, it's only 2 doctors in Stillwater. So it's only 2 doctors and 10 or 12 nurses. So I know they're going through it. So I couldn't imagine what they're going through. I know it's hard because there's no such thing as social distancing. So it's like they're not fortunate like us who can sit in the house and we can all go in separate rooms or anything. They're not fortunate enough to be like that. So it is really, really bad.
So another question that we got is, we know that you have access to a law library when you're in prison, but did you get any help learning how to use it, how to file forms, where to find the information that you needed?
In prison, there's nobody who they're like, I guess it's like they're under contract to say they can't help you with anything as far as the law library or suggesting lawyers or what websites. So there's nobody in the law library. You're lucky enough to find somebody or develop a relationship with someone that knows the law so they can help you look for case laws you want or similar cases to yours. If you're not lucky enough to have a relationship with anybody, then no, you're not going to get any help. You're going to have to go sit at a computer and just start typing stuff and see what you can come up with.
How about when you first got to prison, did you think, and thereafter, did you think that your intake counselor and the counselors that you worked with or case managers understood your needs and assigned you accordingly for housing and work? How was that relationship?
Different prisons have, it's like teachers. I feel like the social workers in prison are like teachers. You find some that really care. You find some that they just do it because this is their job. But so my time in St. Cloud, I never even seen my caseworker. And then when I got to Stillwater, I ended up getting my caseworker named Doug Gruber, and he was really good. He was good on everything, anything I needed, which is getting in contact with you guys, getting in contact with my family if something happened, or helping me get jobs, helping me get in programming. He was really good. Doug, I was fortunate enough to have a good caseworker.
That's good. That's good to know. Another person asked if you can comment on what do you think the average person could do to fix the system to prevent this from happening in the first place?
The average person, it's pretty hard for the average person, but people that be involved in situations like we are in or went through situations like we're in, we can just make sure we get everything right. We can just take our time, and we can not automatically judge people by their book or their past or anything. We just got to make sure, you know what I mean? Everything has to be double checked and stamped to make sure, so we don't have innocent people going to prison. And I feel like if everybody just slows down and makes sure everything is done right and done fair, then we'll have less. This will happen less, way less. I'm not gonna say it's gonna not happen at all, because things happen, but I feel like it'll decrease in happening than what we are now.
Nationally, the statistics have set the number of wrongfully convicted people in prison is somewhere between probably 2 and 5%. We got one person who wrote to us talking about the 4%ers. And I think he's referring to the fact that there could be as many as 4% of people in prison who are actually innocent. And he asked, Javon, do you personally know, without a doubt, of any wrongfully convicted people who are currently incarcerated? And please don't give any names. But are there people that you met in prison that you really believe were innocent? Two? You said two?
Two. And I'll put my stamp on one innocent project. One person being innocent, project innocent. One innocent, project innocent.
We're going to talk about him, but not today.
Not
in this public forum.
I know. No.
Jim or John, we probably have time for one more question?
Go ahead, Jim.
We can't hear you.
Excuse me. I guess you've kind of already been over this, but it's the most fun thing for me to hear you talk about. And so I want you to take us through what it was like after all of this waiting, when you finally heard what the judge's decision was in your case. And what I mean is the good decision, not the guilty verdict. I'm talking about Judge Skagens' decision. What was that like?
Oh man, it was crazy. I was at a table in prison and I was just scared to get on the phone. I had talked to you guys earlier. And my caseworker was leaving for the day. And I remember right before we got on the phone, Julie was like, Javon, just please make sure you check in at 5 o'clock. I think this thing will still come down today. I think we're still going to get an answer today. And I was like, man, you think so? And she's like, yeah, just call Elena at 5, just to make sure. Just call Elena at 5 and I'll call too. And I remember being scared. And I remember like at 5:19 on the dot, I'm like, man, forget it. Let me call her. And I called her and she was just reading it, and it was just reading. And I was just hanging on to every word because she didn't tell me what was said. So she just started reading the order. So I'm just on the phone hanging on to every word. And then I finally heard her say vacated. I'm like, what? What? She's like, hold on, Julie and John and Jim is on the other line. Hold on. And that's when the guys clicked you guys in, and then we just was going crazy. It was just ecstatic. It was funny. It was crazy.
It was super exciting for us too. Those are the best days as a lawyer, right? When this happens.
Yes.
So I want to thank everyone for being here today. And I do also want to make a pitch for Javon. He came out, as many of you know, to the most uncertain economic crisis that we've faced in decades. He's lucky enough to have come out to a wonderful woman and his children, and he's got a place to live. But it could be some time before he finds work, given the economic situation. So we have a GoFundMe page for Javon Davis. You'll find the link to it in the email where you received the link for this interview, or you can just Google Javon Davis, Javon Davis, GoFundMe, and you'll find it as well. If you want to help him out, we would all appreciate it. So thank you. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for supporting our work. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.